I still remember the exact sound of their laughter. It wasn't the warm, champagne-fueled kind you hear when someone tells a charming story at a wedding. This was sharp, cruel. The kind that slices right through you and settles in your bones like winter frost. I was standing near the dessert table in the simple navy dress I had chosen after weeks of searching, elegant enough to show respect, modest enough not to draw attention. I had wanted to look like I belonged, not like I was trying too hard to impress my son's new in-laws. Then I heard her voice, clear and carrying over the string quartet. Isabella's mother, Patricia Harrington, raised her glass and announced to the cluster of guests around her, "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Lucas's mother, the sweet little public school teacher who thinks she can buy her way into our circle." Bless her heart, she actually paid for most of this wedding. Can you imagine? Scraping by on a teacher's salary and still pretending she fits here. It's almost adorable how hard she tries. The laughter that followed was loud and immediate. Several of Isabella's aunts and cousins joined in. One of them added, loud enough for half the room to hear, "The poor thing probably spent her entire life savings on this. Lucas must be so embarrassed." They laughed again. I felt every eye that turned toward me. My cheeks burned. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped wire around it. I looked at my son, my Lucas, the boy I had raised alone after David died. The young man whose college tuition I had paid in full, whose dreams I had supported with every extra tutoring session and late-night grading marathon. He was staring at the floor, jaw tight, not meeting my eyes. Not defending me, not saying a word. That was when something inside me cracked, not my heart, though that would ache later. It was the wall I had built between the woman I really was and the quiet, unassuming mother I had pretended to be for his sake. They had no idea who I really was. If this story touches something deep in you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories of pain, truth, and healing. Let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand what happened that night, you need to know how we got there. My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm 59 years old now. I've lived in the same modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Chicago for 31 years. The one David and I bought when we were young and full of hope. David was a high school history teacher, steady and kind. We were partners in every way. I taught 3rd grade at the local public school. We didn't have much, but we had each other and our little boy, Lucas. When Lucas was 11, David died suddenly of a heart attack. One moment he was grading papers at the kitchen table. The next, he was gone. Lucas and I were shattered. I remember sitting on the floor of our bedroom that night, holding David's favorite sweater, sobbing so hard I thought I might break apart. But Lucas needed me. He was only 11, old enough to understand loss, young enough to still need his mother to make the world feel safe. Everyone expected me to sell the house or move in with family. "You're a widow with a child," they said. "You can't do this alone." But I refused. That house held every memory of David. It was where Lucas had taken his first steps, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays. I kept it. I kept teaching. And I started doing something else in secret. During the day, I taught my 3rd graders with everything I had. Reading circles, science experiments, extra help after school for the kids who struggled. At night, after Lucas went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with stacks of curriculum books and a laptop I had bought on sale. I began creating my own lesson plans and worksheets because the ones provided by the district were outdated and uninspiring. I shared them with other teachers in online forums. Then I started charging a small fee for premium versions. It grew from there. What began as a side hustle to pay for Lucas's soccer cleats and school supplies slowly became something bigger. I founded a small tutoring company after school hours. Then I developed a full curriculum package. Then, an online platform for teachers to share resources. I worked 16-hour days, teaching by day, building the business by night, while raising a grieving boy who missed his father terribly. There were nights I cried in the bathroom so Lucas wouldn't hear. Nights I fell asleep at the table with papers stuck to my cheek. But I never let him see me break. Children need stability. They need to believe their parent has it all under control. By the time Lucas started high school, Ellison Educational Resources had grown into a respected name among teachers across the state. I kept it quiet. I used a different business name for contracts and never brought it home. Lucas knew I tutored on the side. He knew we had enough money for a decent life. He never asked deeper questions, and I never pushed the information on him. I wanted him to feel proud of his own achievements, not defined by his mother's growing success. I paid for his college education in full: tuition, books, housing, everything. When he decided to go to business school for his MBA, I paid for that too. Every semester I wrote the checks without complaint. That's what mothers do. We sacrifice so our children can have more than we did. After graduation, Lucas got a job at a consulting firm. He was making good money. He had his own apartment, his own car. I was so proud I could burst. Then he met Isabella Harrington. The first time he mentioned her, his voice changed. Lighter, almost boyish. Mom, she's incredible. Smart, beautiful, from this amazing family. Her dad runs Harrington Academies, one of the top private school networks in the state. They have this huge estate outside the city. You should see it. When do I get to meet her? I asked. He hesitated. Soon. I just want to make sure we're serious first. That hesitation should have been a warning, but I was too happy for him. 6 months later, he called to say they were engaged. I cried happy tears. Then he told me about the wedding, the venue, the guest list, the expectations of the Harrington family. Dad would want me to give her the wedding she deserves, he said. I agreed without hesitation. I paid for almost everything, $265,000 in total. The Harringtons never offered to contribute, not once. I was sent a dress code, elegant but understated. My seating assignment was at table 17 near the back, with distant cousins and some of the wedding planner's assistants. The mother of the groom pushed to the margins. I told myself it didn't matter. The day was about Lucas's happiness. The wedding was held at a grand historic mansion the Harringtons had rented. Everything sparkled. Crystal, silk, flowers that cost more than my monthly mortgage. I wore my navy dress, did my hair carefully, and smiled through every moment. At the church, I sat in the front row and watched my son at the altar. He looked so much like David. I had given him David's cufflinks that morning. Your father would be so proud, I whispered. He thanked me, but wouldn't quite meet my eyes. At the reception, the speeches began. Richard Harrington stood and welcomed Lucas into our family, as if Lucas had none of his own. Isabella's maid of honor spoke. The best man spoke. Lucas thanked the Harringtons for the beautiful day. He never mentioned me. I told myself it was nerves. It meant nothing. After dinner, people mingled. I stood near the dessert table watching Lucas and Isabella's first dance when I heard Patricia's voice behind me. I turned, thinking perhaps she wanted to thank me. Instead, she was speaking to a group of her friends and relatives, all holding champagne flutes. That's her, Patricia said, gesturing with her glass. Lucas's mother, the public school teacher. Can you believe she paid for most of this? She's been hovering around the planning like she belongs. It's embarrassing, really. She doesn't understand our world. She's simple. Poor thing probably thinks this makes her one of us." One of the aunts laughed. "The desperate teacher mom trying to buy status. How sad." Another added, "Lucas must be mortified. He's always been so polished. She's just not." Then Patricia raised her voice a little more, clear enough for several nearby tables to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the poor little teacher we have to put up with. Bless her heart, she tried." The laughter that followed was loud and merciless. I stood frozen, the words cutting deeper than any knife. I waited for someone, anyone, to object. No one did. I looked at Lucas. He was standing with Isabella's brothers, staring at the floor again, face flushed. Not a single word in my defense. That was the moment everything changed. If this story is speaking to your heart, please consider subscribing. These stories come from real places of pain and the strength that comes after. I didn't confront them that night. I walked straight out of the reception, past the dancing couples and the expensive centerpieces I had paid for, and drove home in silence. When I got there, I kicked off my heels and went straight to David's old office. Now mine. I poured 2 fingers of his favorite whiskey and sat in his leather chair. On the desk was his photograph, taken the year before he died. He was smiling that gentle smile that always made everything feel possible. "I messed up, David," I said to the picture. "I raised him to be independent, but somewhere along the way he learned to be ashamed of me." The phone started buzzing almost immediately. Texts from Isabella, calls from Patricia. Then Lucas himself. I let most of them go to voicemail. When Lucas called again near midnight, I answered. "Mom," he said, voice tight. "Where did you go? Isabella's family is upset. They said you left without saying goodbye, and they mentioned something about you being the new CEO or chair of some education group. That can't be right. What's going on?" I took a slow breath. "It's been in the works for years, Lucas. I didn't mention it because you never asked about my work. You never showed interest beyond the checks I wrote." Silence. Then, "This is going to make things complicated. Isabella's family feels ambushed. They're saying you own controlling interest in Harrington Academies now. How is that even possible?" "Because while you were telling your fiancé that I was just a struggling public school teacher who could barely afford to help with the wedding, I was quietly building one of the largest education companies in the state. Summit Education Partners started as my after-school tutoring notes. It grew into curriculum, then online platforms, then school management. 3 years ago, I began acquiring shares in Harrington's parent company. Last week, the board voted me in as the new chair. My first official day is Monday." He was quiet for a long time. You hid this from me?" "No, Lucas. You hid me from them. You told Isabella I was embarrassing, poor, someone to be managed. That's what she repeated to her family. That's why they laughed at me tonight." He didn't deny it. The silence told me everything. "I love you," I said finally. "But I'm done being the secret you're ashamed of. We'll talk after Monday." I hung up before he could respond. Then I let myself cry. Deep, shaking sobs that had been building for years. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I reviewed every financial statement, every contract, every instance of nepotism at Harrington Academies. Richard Harrington had inherited a once strong network of private schools and had slowly run it into the ground with high salaries for unqualified family members, below market tuition for connected families, and bloated administrative costs. The schools were still prestigious on paper, but they were losing enrollment and bleeding money. Monday morning, I arrived at the Harrington headquarters at 8:30. Richard was already pacing in his office. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked in. "Margaret," he said, voice strained. "I had no idea. Isabella never mentioned—" "Because Lucas never told her the truth about me," I replied calmly. "Shall we go to the boardroom?" In the boardroom, I laid out the restructuring plan. Nepotism positions eliminated or transitioned to performance-based roles. Family members on bloated salaries given 90 days to prove value or exit. Tuition and fees reviewed for sustainability. New performance metrics for all staff. The actual educators and support staff, the people doing the real work, would receive better benefits and support. The entitled family members would not. Richard looked like he had aged a decade overnight. You're gutting my family's legacy. I'm saving a business your family has been mismanaging for years, I said. Your daughter called me embarrassing and poor at my son's wedding. Your wife encouraged the laughter. Now you'll learn what it means to earn your place. He asked if there was any way to buy me out. I smiled without warmth. Even if you could afford it, which the financials show you cannot, why would I sell a company I've spent decades building to people who have proven they can't manage it? I left him sitting alone and walked to my new office. My assistant handed me messages. Lucas had called 6 times. Isabella had requested a meeting. Not today, I said. Maybe not this week. Over the next days, the changes rolled out. Word spread fast. Fear and uncertainty filled the hallways. Exactly what was needed after years of complacency. The working staff began to breathe easier. The family members who had coasted began to panic. Lucas showed up at my house on Wednesday evening, looking haggard. Mom, please, you have to stop. Isabella's family is falling apart. Her dad came home looking destroyed. Her brother's position was cut. They're saying you're destroying them because of what happened at the wedding? I'm restructuring a failing company, I replied. The same way I rebuilt my life after your father died. If certain positions can't be justified by performance, they go. That's business. It's also what happens when you treat people with cruelty and then discover they hold your future in their hands. He sat heavily on the couch. I told Isabella you were difficult, that you were a public school teacher who struggled financially but was too proud to admit it, that you called too much and offered help we didn't need. I said you were embarrassing sometimes, always trying too hard to be involved. I didn't want her family to think I came from nothing. I wanted them to see me as their equal. The words landed like stones. So you lied about the woman who raised you alone, paid for your education, and funded your wedding so you could impress people who mock teachers for a living? I was ashamed, he admitted, voice breaking. Not of you, of needing you, of still relying on you at 30. I wanted to look successful on my own. Isabella came the next evening. She looked smaller, without the perfect makeup and designer clothes. Mrs. Ellison, I owe you an apology. What I said, what my mother said, was cruel. I repeated things Lucas told me. He made you sound controlling and desperate. I believed him because I wanted to believe I was marrying into a world where I wouldn't have to worry. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. She told me everything. How Lucas had hidden my success, exaggerated my struggles, portrayed me as someone to tolerate rather than respect. How he had even taken small loans in my name without telling me when he overspent trying to keep up appearances. I listened. Then I said, I created the conditions that allowed this. I gave and gave without boundaries because I thought love meant never saying no. I taught him he could take without gratitude. That ends now. Over the following weeks, Lucas stayed at his job within the restructured company, but on merit, not name. He entered therapy. Isabella started working at one of the schools as a teacher's aide, learning the reality of education from the ground up. They moved into a smaller apartment and began living within their actual means. We had monthly dinners at my house, simple meals, honest conversation. No more checks without accountability. 6 months later, Harrington Academies is stabilizing. Enrollment is up. The entitled family members who couldn't adapt have left. The educators who actually teach are thriving under better support. Lucas is performing well in operations and finally understands what real work looks like. Isabella and I have coffee once a month. She's learning humility and purpose. Lucas and I talk every week, not about money, but about life, therapy, and the man he's becoming. I still talk to David's photograph every night. We did the best we could, I tell him. We gave too much without teaching enough about earning, but he's learning, and so am I. I'm learning that love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. That being a good mother sometimes means letting your child face consequences so they can grow. That respect is earned, not inherited, and that it's never too late to stop being taken for granted, even by your own family, even by yourself. If someone in your life has made you feel small, embarrassing, or less than, know this. You have the right to stand up. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to be respected simply because you exist, not because of what you provide or how quietly you endure. It took being laughed at and called poor and embarrassing at my son's wedding for me to fully claim that truth. I hope you can learn it with less pain. But if you must be broken first, remember, the breaking can be the beginning of becoming who you were always meant to be. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it moved you, please hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they are worthy of respect. There are more stories like this on the channel, stories of hurt, truth, and the strength that rises after. Until next time, be kind to yourself, set your boundaries, demand your respect, and never let anyone make you feel like less than the powerful person you are. Good night, and God bless you.